Welcome to Living Low Sodium with Mary Schepp. We'll be going live in 30 seconds.
Suddenly feel like I'm on AM radio at 2 a.m.
That's right. Welcome to NPR.
Right? Oh, no, the painting guy.
Oh, yeah. Bob Ross.
Yes.
Yeah.
To make a little stroke here.
Yeah, he's just a friend. Everybody's got a friend.
Behind the scenes with Living Low Sodium.
That's right.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Too funny.
All right, let's do this. That was loud. There we go. Welcome to Living Low Sodium with Mary Schepp. Join Mary as she tickles your taste buds with her salty wit and her exceptional palate, all whilst guiding us through the land of low sodium living. Brought to you in part through the support of our friends at Reeses Barkery Pawtique. Check them out at reesesbarkery.com or give them a call at 815-363-7297 and visit Mary at www.mylosolifestyle.com. Today, base recipes. Good morning.
Good morning. So did you eat all the bread again
Not
today?
quite yet. I still have some. I thought I would eat some during the show. So
Yeah. It got me thinking. Last week I brought in the banana bread that I make.
oh man, we're still playing the music
I was
for
gonna
some
say
reason.
we're
What
still.
happened? There. Oh,
I brought in the banana bread, and
it was delicious.
it got me thinking about how many times and how many conversations I've had about people that don't like to cook, people that don't want to cook, people that don't have time to cook,
Mhm.
they don't know how to cook. They, regardless of what your cooking reason is,
People haven't been taught to cook, I think.
I a lot of maybe my generation didn't.
Mhm.
I know older generations did because it was a necessity.
A necessity. Mhm.
And I think that there's a decent amount of the younger generation because of the Food Network kind of,
Mhm.
you can be on shows and stuff like that. So I think that there's a lot more of it now with younger generations. One of my really, really good friends, her son is just an amazing baker. He loves it. He loves everything about it.
That's a
And
science, baking. Yeah.
well, the nice in their family, I think they're called it's like pizzelles or pizzelles. It's an Italian flat cookie. Um, they're super thin. You know what I'm talking about? Like it's like they make it's a little press, almost like a waffle, but it's really 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 thin.
I know exactly what you're saying.
They make them every Christmas. So for his entire life, they've had traditions around cooking. So the kid just loves cooking. He took to it. He's really really good at it. So I know that there's a lot of the younger generations that do know how to cook, but you're right. There's a lot of people who just they have no clue.
What a pizzelli? Pizzelle?
Yes.
Pizzelle. Yeah.
Anything that's Italian or French, I
Pizzle?
can never pronounce it.
Pizzle? I don't know.
Pizzle.
I don't know.
What are you, Snoop Dogg?
Yeah. Pizzizzle?
So, mastering a few basic recipes can make a significant difference in your cooking and your recipe options. And if you don't have basic cooking skills, then you might want to work on that a little bit. So, chopping an onion, everybody hates it. It makes you cry. It is what it is. And putting a wet paper towel on your cutting board, I'm sorry to tell you, it will not stop you from crying. It won't. There's so many different wives' tales about how the only one I found that if you breathe through your mouth, the reason being is that you are literally, as you exhale, you are blowing the sulfur fumes from the onion away from your face so they don't waft right up in your face when you're cutting them. Or if you have like a fan or something behind you, in the summertime, I have this little fan I put in my kitchen because my kitchen gets real hot. And it's literally it's the sulfur fumes coming from the onion that makes your eyes water. So if you have something that blows them away from you, is really the only thing that I found in my entire cooking career. Good morning, Gwen. Good morning, Pamela. That stops you from crying with onions. But onions are, or even try it with a zucchini or something like that, that doesn't make you cry. Basic knife skills make a difference because most people are used to working with very dull knives. And the second somebody puts a sharp knife in your hand, you're going to lose half your fingernail, which is what I did cutting cabbage. I got a brand new knife set, was all excited, super sharp. All my life, I thought I had sharp knives. They were sharp enough to cut what I was cooking. They were not sharp knives. They weren't. So when you get handed, which is why you always see on cooking shows, and you're going, I've never cut myself. In cooking shows, you watch, Amber Al or someone else, they cringe every time someone cuts weird because you're like, ooh, you're going to slice your finger off. Anybody that's an actual chef that gets their knife sharpened on a regular basis or keeps their knives sharpened themselves, they know there's a big difference between a properly sharpened knife and one that is in most of our kitchen drawers in most households on the planet. So basic knife skills.
You know what I did? You know what I did this past week just because I'm lazy? Is I was making gourmet frozen pizza. So in other words, Jack's, and then I cooked
gourmet, huh?
Yeah, I cooked the Jack's and then put raw onion on top when it's done, right? So I already had the pizza cutter out, and I've got a nice stainless steel pizza cutter, not a plastic.
Is it a wheel or is it one of the?
Yeah, it's a wheel.
Okay.
And I just I sliced the onion with the pizza cutter. It worked great. I was very impressed. I didn't cry either. Because I just rolled it through. I was like, let's see if this works. I really don't want to reach across the oven to get the knife.
Right.
So
it's brutal.
And it worked.
That's brutal. And so it's funny because the same with garlic. Mm-hmm. The fresher the onion or garlic or any of the allium family is, the more pungent the flavor and the smell and the fumes. Also, the type of garlic or onion that you are cutting into will make a difference as well. So super sweet Vidalia onions usually don't make me cry. The Spanish white onions or surprisingly purple onions, if they're fresh, make me cry like a baby. It's ridiculous. But those basic knife skills make a big difference. The other one that I always tell people is even if you don't like fried eggs, or even if you don't like eggs, to fry an egg, to learn how to fry an egg. Because I know most of us have nonstick pans, but if you use stainless steel or cast iron has to be properly seasoned. So if your stuff is sticking to your cast iron, it is either A, not properly seasoned, or B, not hot enough.
Not hot enough, yeah.
One of two things. So when you learn how to fry an egg, if your pan is the correct temperature and you're using the correct type of oil or medium to cook in that pan, the food will let you know when to release. It caramelizes, it creates that Maillard reaction, and it will let you flip it. It's how it goes across the board with just about anything. And you're always going to, even with the best pans on the face of the planet, you go into any chef's kitchen and there is schmutz. I believe it's called the flan. Something like that. There's some fancy culinary term for the schmutz that gets stuck to the bottom, the meat bits, the onion bits, the brown bits that get, which is what you use to make pan sauce with. But it doesn't matter how good your pan is, unless it's an actually the chemically treated Teflon non-stick pans, and even those get crap on them every once in a while. But when you learn how to fry an egg, it does make a difference. It teaches you the temperature of the pan. It teaches you to, you can actually see the oil or the fat that you use. Like I like to use clarified butter because of its smoke point. It's got a really high smoke point, which is why a lot of chefs use it. You can see the ripple in the butter, almost like an oil slick on a lake or something like that, where you can see that discoloration or that ripple. You can see it. You can tell. So it's so funny to me how something so simple as frying an egg can teach you so much about cooking. And that translates to steaks and burgers and fish, because that's always a tricky one. You really need to know how to fry something if you're going to cook fish, unless you cheat and just put it on a grill or something.
That's it. Yeah, and that you got to have a smoking hot cast iron pan for that. Otherwise, that skin is like
right. And it does, and that's the thing, is there's the fat that you use, because a lot of people, everybody sees, olive oil, olive oil, olive oil, olive oil.
EEOV.
Yeah, depending on the type of olive oil you're using, the smoke points aren't that high. So most of the olive oil that I use is for finishing. So I get most of my olive oils from the olive tap, unless I'm lucky enough to have somebody traveling back from Italy that brings me some occasionally. Hasn't happened in a while. So if any of my friends out there are going to Italy, bring me back some olive oil and some balsamic. I'd really appreciate it. Maybe I'll cook for you. Maybe I'll make some. What did I make today?
Gary, if you're over there, just send it over. We'll take care of shipping.
Right? You keep saying that. Have you checked how much it costs to ship something from Singapore?
No.
We'll see it in a year, and it's going to cost you $1,000. So this morning I made apple cinnamon cranberry bread.
And it's delicious. It's almost gone.
But the frying an egg teaches you a lot. The big thing that I learned is not everything, and we talked about this on one of the previous shows, not everything needs to go into your oven at 350 degrees. Oh. I did that for probably 20 years. Everything that went in the oven, didn't matter what it was. I was roasting vegetables, I was making a pizza, unless the package told me to put it at a different temperature. And even then, like if you get a pizza and it says put it at 425, I'm going, really? Mm-hmm. Like you almost, in my naivety, I would question myself, can my oven go that hot? Like, yes, it can go that hot. Not everything needs to be. So if you're roasting vegetables, you're probably going to be closer to 400 or 425. Bread, my husband is finally, he's finally to the point where he stops questioning when I turn the oven on. I think he still twitches a little bit, and it makes him nervous because the oven's really old and our house is extremely old. But when you bake bread, most bakers that make bread or pizza, their ovens are 500-600 degrees. Yeah. And that's on the low end. If you get someone that's got a proper like stone Italian pizza oven, those things are like 1,200, 2,000 degrees on the deck. They're screaming hot. What did he say?
He says bread 350 degrees, tomato 350 degrees, wet clothes 360.
That's funny. So yeah, you do, because that's with roasted vegetables. I could never figure out how you'd go to someplace like Olive Garden and get those little baby roasted potatoes, and they're perfect. Some restaurants cheat and they actually parboil their potatoes, then roast them at a screaming hot temperature, which gets that Maillard reaction, that crusty nice bit on the outside. But if you're roasting vegetables, you should start at a higher temperature. And if they're still not soft and tender on the inside because it's a bigger piece of vegetable or a bigger potato, you bring it down so that it finishes cooking. But those are big things. And those few things make it easy once you start with, like I said, with a couple base recipes. Salad dressings, dips, red sauces, which depending on where you are and what you've grown up with is anywhere between a pomodoro sauce, a meat sauce, a bolognese sauce. I know that there's definitions for all of them, but most of them are still some sort of Italian tomato sauce with olive oil, basil, and garlic. Muffins, like the bread that I brought in today. Soups, and I know that baking has, to go back to the muffins, baking is a little bit more of a science, but there's still some recipes that can be your go-to, and you can switch it up pretty easily. I have a recipe here I'll share with you in a few minutes. I also put like hamburger helper, chili, meatloaf, and gravy. You wouldn't think of chili as a base recipe, but if you know the base to a decent chili, you can turn a whole mess of stuff in your pantry into an amazing dish. And I know everybody call it like turkey chili or chicken chili or beef chili, vegetarian chili. I make a mean squash chili. I don't know if I brought that into the station or not. I don't remember. But something like that can be a base recipe and you can turn it into something else. So once you have that base, that's where you can say, okay, I don't have this, or I don't want to make chili,
Yeah.
but this works really good. So maybe if I throw in a little bit of this, that, or the other, I'm telling you, almost all of my recipes start with the same thing. 2 tablespoons clarified butter, 1 whole onion diced, 3 garlic cloves or 12, depending on my mood, but it's never less than 3.
Yep.
And 6 ounces of white or red wine, depending on what I'm cooking. So fish, chicken, poultry, usually a white wine. Game meat, red meat, it's your standard. Red wine goes with dark,
And the alcohol's cooked off, right?
sort of.
Ish.
Sort of.
Okay.
Depending, so if you make a saganaki, which for those of you who don't know, the saganaki, if you go to any Greek restaurant, it's the oppa, they light the cheese on fire.
Cheese.
It's ouzo, which is just alcohol that's dumped on a Greek cheese and then lit on fire. So the alcohol, so when you feed your kids that, the alcohol does not go away.
Oh.
If you cook something like a sauce or a stew or a wine sauce that cooks for a long period of time, the vast majority of it is cooked off.
Mm-hmm.
When you light the flaming cheese on fire, the vapors, the alcohol vapors is what makes that flame. And then once the vapors are gone, the fire goes out. You didn't boil the liquid. You didn't simmer it for a long time to reduce, like it's still there. So now granted, it's a shot of alcohol that usually 4 people are splitting on a dish. Mm-hmm. So the chances of anybody getting intoxicated from that. That being said, if you're someone such as myself that has liver disease or a medical condition where alcohol affects you,
yeah,
or if you have an alcoholic dependency issue, those kinds of meals can wholeheartedly trigger a relapse. So that's why a lot of people who do have alcoholism and things of that nature and addictive personalities, they can't even have a wine sauce or anything in their presence, because it does that consumption of it, your body is well aware that there's even that trace amount in there, and it can trigger those chemical reactions in your body. So you got to be careful.
Judy says, I don't dare to use alcohol.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, and why I like your starter, and when taking a look at this, I follow a guy on TikTok called Stale Cracker, and he's from Louisiana, and he always starts everything with the Holy Trinity, which is onion, bell pepper, and celery. And so I was like, well, where did that come from? Because I love following him, because he'll make big pots of stuff, right?
Sure.
But actually, there's starters from all around the world.
There are.
So like France will call their Holy Trinity onion, carrot, celery. So does Italy is onion, carrot, celery. Germany, it's carrot, celery, and leek. And Spain is onion, bell pepper, and tomato.
Which is funny because leeks are just a type of onion.
Yeah.
And that comes down to regional availability.
Okay.
So over in Europe, bell peppers weren't necessarily, so it was the, carrots and onions. And so depending on where you were and what you grew up with, and it's, why Germans have a lot more cabbage and krauts. They got winter vegetables.
Okay.
So, like Judy's saying, she doesn't dare use alcohol. For a very long time, I would be very limited because I wasn't sure how it, or if it would affect me, because I have, advanced liver disease. And even though I'm doing really well, it didn't go away. It's still there.
Still there.
I'm just blessed that I've been very strict with my food and my regimen, that it's got me off my medications, but it doesn't mean I can, put 6 shots of whatever. So in the event that I am not using a wine, depending on what I'm cooking, I will either just, like when I make risotto, I usually only use stock. All risotto recipes that you come across, almost all of them that I've ever seen, they start with wine and then stock to finish cooking. I don't. I've noticed how I feel afterwards, so I don't no, I couldn't tell you scientifically how much does or does not cook out of the alcohol. I just know how, because I'm so sensitive now to things, how it makes me feel. So I don't use wine in my risotto. So I will use just a stock, a vegetable stock, a beef stock, chicken stock, whatever stock, broth, anything. You can use that in place of wine. You don't have to have the wine. What I will typically do is add a little extra squirt or two of balsamic vinegar to get that tang
Okay.
that a wine would give you. You can also use juice. Now, when I say juice, I don't mean juice cocktail from the refrigerated
No juice
section
box, right?
that you drink with your breakfast. I mean the expensive stuff that is straight up pucker your cheek, nothing but cranberry concentrate, or grapefruit or whatever.
Or a squeeze of a.
Right,
Right.
where it is full blown, just straight, those tart, the same things that, grape juice or cranberry, that's the same stuff that they make into wine. It's just not
Yeah.
fermented. So when you get an unsweetened, unadulterated, if you want that fruit background that those wines give to your dish, I will use a broth with a couple shots of that. So it takes a little bit of playing with if you're not using an alcoholic base like a wine, but you can most definitely do it.
And Stacy says, how about non-alcoholic wine or non-alcohol wine?
You can. You got to be careful because a lot of times with the non-alcoholic stuff, it's higher in sugars.
Yeah.
So again, you kind of got to play with it a little bit and taste it and say, okay, is this sweet? Because you got to remember that when you cook it, it's going to reduce down in that sweetness. So even when you look at recipes, they predominantly ask for a dry or white or red wine.
Yeah.
Because if you use a Moscato and that's a super sweet white wine, you're going to reduce it down, cook all the alcohol, you're going to end up with a super sweet dish.
Yeah.
So you just gotta play with it a little bit, but you most definitely can use non-alcoholic stuff. You just gotta pay attention to how much sugar that they added to those things.
And then
Sure.
Judy says, I've used cider vinegar to deglaze a pan when cooking fish, but it won't work for a recipe calling for dry white wine.
No, cider can be, again, it's got such a different flavor profile, and when it's concentrated and cooked down, in all honesty, I have found it's a little higher in sodium, but I'm okay with it. Pacific Foods makes organic stocks and broths, and they have a low sodium vegetable broth that I've come to really, really enjoy. So a lot of times I keep that in my refrigerator, and that is what I will deglaze my stuff with, because it doesn't take a lot. So if you're making a pan sauce, so if you fry a steak or vegetables or whatever in some clarified butter and you get those brown bits on the bottom of your pan, if you're a meat eater, I keep pork lard. I got a big tub of it in my fridge. You throw, just a teaspoon or a tablespoon of that pork lard in there. That fat is absolutely amazing. A little tiny bit of flour and whatever stock you got, if you're not using wine, and create a quick pan sauce or gravy. And even if you don't want to use the flour and thicken it up, you can just put some broth in there and screaming hot pan, and it cooks all those bits off the bottom. And suddenly you have a pan sauce to pour over whatever you just cooked. So
cool.
I'm trying to think of if there's anything else I've used other than wine. And there has been the occasion where if you have brown bits on the bottom of the pan and I don't have broth or wine or anything handy, I don't eat salt anymore. So I don't need a huge punch of flavor. I'll straight up use water.
Yeah.
And if the crusty bits on the bottom of the pan, especially if you're cooking pork or beef, it is more than enough to make a flavorful gravy. So when I start with that butter, onions, and wine, or butter, onions, and broth, and it's not a lot of broth because you reduce it down. So if it's 4 or 6 ounces of broth and it cooks down really, really quick, or wine, once that's cooked down, then I go from there and make anything I want, whether I add tomato paste and go to a tomato type dish, or I'll add a can. That's how I make my red sauce, is that same clarified butter, onions, garlic, and wine, or stock, what a broth, whatever I've got. And then I will do a large can, I think it's a 32-ounce can of San Marzano tomatoes, whole plum tomatoes with the sauce, no salt added. The ones I get usually are the Cento brand from Italy. They're a little bit more expensive, but it makes an amazing sauce. You smash them up in the pan, basil, thyme, rosemary, some fresh garlic, lots of pepper, and if you want, some cracked red pepper flake
Love it.
or paprika, a shot of balsamic vinegar, and your sauce is done. So by the time it takes me to make that red sauce, my pasta is done cooking, and I can't remember the last time I bought a jar of any kind of red sauce, spaghetti sauce, ragu, whatever you want to call it. It's funny how particular people get about their jars of spaghetti sauce, like ragu, classico, prego. People are like, it's almost like pizza wars. They get really, really particular about their red sauce.
My grandfather was that way, my mom's dad, and he would not anything out of a jar. It had to be homemade. Old Swedish guy, right? So had to be homemade. And then one day they were over for dinner or something. My mom was telling me a story. I was very young, and she used ragu or prego or something, but threw the jar out before her dad got there. He's like, "This is delicious."
Oh no, it's the salt. That's
It
hilarious.
had to have been, right?
Well, that's the thing is once I figured out how to make that red sauce, and if I add something to it, if I add a beef or, ground beef, or even straight up, if I have leftover, because I'll make big batches of pulled beef or pork or whatever,
Yeah.
mildly seasoned, and freeze it. That makes an amazing bolognese sauce. If you just make that red sauce and then throw shredded beef in there, it's absolutely fantastic.
Delicious.
Absolutely fantastic. So that's anytime I make spaghetti or pasta or anything, mastacholi on a weeknight, that's exactly how
Yeah, the number one bolognese brand in Singapore
is Prego.
Prego.
I like the Classico. I like the Classico because I've always liked the Classico if I'm gonna buy a jar of sauce. But as far as low sodium goes, the Classico sauces are lower on the spectrum as far as red sauces go.
Red sauces and I don't necessarily get along. They're mean to me. But
you and my husband both.
But if there's got to be a ton of garlic in there.
So I found, because my husband had the same issue.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Every time I'd make spaghetti or pasta with a red sauce, lasagna, whatever it was, stuffed shells, and he would get that gut rot afterwards.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a heartburn. It's just exactly. it's gut rot.
Yeah.
So for a while we thought maybe he was eating too much. You took too big of a portion, shouldn't have gone back for seconds, whatever it was. And then I discovered if I was making a jarred sauce, I would add either a teaspoon, probably about a half a teaspoon of sugar or a teaspoon of honey. The sugar cuts the acid.
Yeah.
And he stopped having that issue. Of course, now he still has it in his brain because he had 20 years of gut rot from red sauce, so he can't get rid of it. So we still have red sauce a lot now. We do. We really do. But he hasn't had to deal with that gut rot in a long time. When I was still using jarred sauce, because I would use a sugar and I would cut it. You cook it down versus just heating it up. So you actually let it simmer for 20 minutes to get that jarred or canned flavor away.
Yeah.
And you cut the acid with a little bit of sugar. But now that I make my sauce from scratch with the San Marzano tomatoes, he hasn't had that issue. I don't know if it's something that's in the canned version.
Could be, yeah. Jarred version, could be.
God only knows.
Gary says during our COVID lockdown in 2020, Prego was the only brand of sauce to be completely sold out across the country. Replenishment did not arrive till 5 months later.
Yeah, that'll get people in a habit pretty quick.
Right. And then Pamela says, love my 20 milligram Sprouts brand.
The Sprouts brands are actually not brand. I've had that. It's hard because, like I said before, so many different sauces, when they say they're no sodium or low sodium, it's potassium chloride that they use to make that salty flavor, and then it just tastes like horribly, horribly bad for me. So there's another trick that I use for my macaroni and cheese or my creamy type
Okay.
sauce. There's the proper way to make a homemade macaroni and cheese with a bechamel or a roux where you may, the flour and all of that whole process. I tend to be too lazy for that. It'd be too easily distracted for that. So I end up screwing it up, and then I have to add, more cream or more flour or more broth or more this or more that. And the next thing you know, and that's why I always do this with my gravy. When I make biscuits and gravy is I start off thinking I'm going to make enough gravy for me and my husband, but then I make it too thick and I got to thin it out. And then I make it too thin and I got to thicken it up. And the next thing you know, I end up with a vat of sauce of any kind that, so anytime I try and make a cream sauce that way, it just does not work for me. So my cheat is evaporated milk. Oh. Now, when you evaporate milk or you cook milk down or anything, it's higher in fat.
Okay.
So you're going to have a fattier sauce. So if you've ever been to a restaurant or somewhere like that where their Alfredo sauce or something of that nature has, like, you can tell that it's a little fattier.
Yeah.
Or if you take it home and it's great at the restaurant, but you take it home and you go to reheat it and you're like, wow, this kind of, the texture is different. It broke a little bit. Like, I don't care. I'm at home. It's me and my husband and it tastes fantastic. So clarified butter, onions, garlic, simmer it up.
Okay.
Put my pasta in and, the cooked pasta, one of those cans of, make sure it's not condensed milk because that's sweetened. Big mistake. But you put that evaporated milk in there, it stays thin. So when the heat is on and you're stirring it up and you add some cheese to it, it stays thin. Add whatever spices. If you want to add Dax, nothing but ranch, and make a ranch macaroni and cheese, simply amazing. But it does. In the pan, it stays thin. But the second you turn that heat off and set your table and come back and go to scoop it up, it's a super thick, creamy macaroni and cheese. The evaporated milk is already evaporated. So the even though it's a liquid, the water content in the pasta absorbs it. The carbs, that pasta water, essentially acts like a flour for a thickening. So if you, it literally, the rest of the water is absorbed into your pasta noodles. You have the creamy cheese with the milk, and it turns into this perfect macaroni and cheese. And it's fairly low in sodium. So that's my cheat for macaroni and cheese. And then you're only bound, the sodium is literally determined by what cheese you use. I know a lot of people argue they don't like Swiss cheese. Try a good Swiss cheese. So if you do like half cheddar and half Swiss in a macaroni and cheese like that, then there's something about that Swiss cheese, because I'm not a fan of Swiss on a sandwich. But when you cook it and the flavor profile changes a little bit, you still get that cheesy punch without, so it makes a big difference. Yeah, he says I can identify with the stomach problem with the jarred sauce.
Katie,
yeah.
Welcome to the
there's
club.
A lot of people that have that. It's the acid in the tomatoes, and the easiest way to cut that. I mean, you got to be careful because sugar is sugar, so you don't want to add too much. So that's, since I stopped using sugar, I use honey. So you use a little smidge of honey.
A little shot of honey.
Yep. Bloop. Oh, I'm gonna choke on my coffee.
Smooth coffee.
I know,
this
right?
morning.
Whew.
Of course, you're listening to 21.6 The Net. This is Living Low Sodium with Mary Schepp. That's just a good station break for you while you were dying from your coffee.
Well, I die on my choke on my
Look at that,
coffee.
right at the bottom of the hour almost,
right?
Too. Perfect timing.
So dips are easy to me because...
Are you a big dip person? Do you do a lot of dips?
I haven't lately, but I do. Okay. Once I learned how easy they were, pretty much when I did the dip show 2 years ago,
that was a couple
when I brought dips for you guys. You take sour cream or yogurt and pretty much put anything you want in there.
Yeah, I just enjoy a chip. I don't need a dip.
I'm a dipper.
If I'm doing anything, it's hummus.
I do make a really good hummus.
Yeah. So if I'm gonna, Otherwise, I don't like my chips violated with dip.
I don't know if I would call it violated. Oh, she says she's
Yeah.
going to use honey now. You got to be careful, and because honey has distinct flavors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So depending on how light or dark the honey is, there's distinct flavors of honey. So you got to taste it and make sure it's not going to kill your sauce. But a little bit goes a long way. It really does. But it adds this back end flavor that everyone that tastes my sauce is like, there's something there.
Yeah.
And I can't place my finger on it.
But I'm also not the guy who gets like, peanut butter and jelly tasting chips. I'm just a straight chip guy. You give me a regular chip.
I'm kind of the same. I like a straight up, just a plain old potato chip or a plain tortilla chip or
sea salt and vinegar.
Yeah, something like that.
But I know I shouldn't say that on low sodium.
Before I came in, I was watching a cooking show just because it was on. And there's nothing on Saturday mornings.
There is nothing on
or Sunday mornings for that matter.
The Olympics now, but
yeah, right. But there was a show on, and as soon as it turns on, I unmuted the TV, and I was sitting there because I finished finalizing my notes, and it says, "So yeah, when you make smoked sea salt," and Ben's like, "Really?" So I was watching a cooking show on all the different kinds of salt. I was like, "Oh, I mean, it is." There are some really good salts out there, and if you can afford it in your diet, the fresh, sea salts or smoked salts as a finishing salt, like on a tomato, where you get like 3 or 4 crystals of salt. As somebody who doesn't eat salt, it's amazing, and a little bit goes a long way. So I still do keep a little bit in my cabinet. I just don't cook with it. But I like dips. One of my favorites now is a spinach water chestnut.
Oh, that does sound good.
So either sour cream or yogurt or a mix of both. Just like my generation, when I was younger, it was always the 16-ounce tub of sour cream and the Lipton onion soup mix.
Correct.
But if you take that 16 ounces of sour cream or 16 ounces of yogurt or Icelandic skyr or half and half, either way, they're all fairly low. The sour cream is the lowest in sodium of all of them. But you can mix whatever you want in there. So I would take and drain frozen spinach, fresh chopped onions, garlic, and finely chopped water chestnuts, and then whatever spice I felt like, whatever spice is in my cupboard. If I want to put paprika, if I want to do the Dax nothing but ranch or the Red Mountain Rub, doesn't matter. Any spice that I've got, put it in there. Most artichokes, unless you make them yourselves, are really hard to find without salt.
Oh, really?
They're usually stored in a salted water. Trust me, I've looked. And they're really expensive. So, but no, you can make a dip out of anything. So that's where I do all the time, like what's in my cabinet, and it's usually sour cream, garlic, and then what do I have? I've got onions, I've got carrots, I've got zucchini, I've got whatever. Mix it in with the sour cream, and you've got a chunky dip. So it doesn't have to be that sour cream and onion packet, which is pretty much just salt with dehydrated onion bits in it. Yeah. So yeah, no, I will, and that's why I started making my own dips, because I'll eat the whole jar. Mm-hmm. I like my potato chips violated, so
yeah, I gotta have unadulterated chips.
So when it comes to salad dressing, are you like a ranch guy, a French guy, or a balsamic?
I love the Thousand Islands.
Oh, the ketchup mayonnaise one.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is pretty much Russian dressing with mayonnaise.
Or the special sauce, as McDonald's calls it.
Right.
But now I am all about, and we're going to give them a shout out here. I am all about Chick-fil-A sauce.
Really?
It's amazing.
Come on. I honestly don't think I have ever had Chick-fil-A.
Oh, it is amazing.
Never in my entire life have I had Chick-fil-A.
I've got to look at the sodium. I haven't. It's just delicious, though.
If it's Thousand Island-ish,
ish.
I'm guessing it's probably about 400.
Yeah, probably.
450 per tablespoon or two.
Probably tablespoon. Because it's so good that it probably is really high. Right? It's like,
well, that's the Olive Garden salad dressing that's amazing.
Yeah.
Which is just a creamy Italian dressing. I think it's like 580 $1.80. It might have changed. I haven't looked at it in a long time. But most people with salad dressings, especially if you dress the salad versus having the dressing on the side, which is what I've taken to doing, is I will have them give me the little cup or two of dressing on the side.
I do the same.
And then I eat my salad and dip it.
Dip it.
Because then surprisingly enough, you don't need that much.
No, and every bite gets some then.
Right.
Because with a lot of times,
half is all on one lettuce leaf, and then the rest is not dressed.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, my family's a ranch. We're ranchers. They'll put ranch. My kids will put ranch on everything.
Pizza.
Yeah, absolutely.
I grew up with ranch on pizza.
Yeah.
And ketchup on pizza.
Oh no.
And ketchup on grilled cheese sandwiches, and ketchup on French fries, and ketchup. I used to salt my ketchup.
Ketchup on egg sandwiches.
Yes. Oh.
See,
now I want an egg sandwich. And it had to be the horribly bad for you Wonder Bread.
Oh yes.
This just white fluffy sawdust.
Yes.
Sorry, Wonder Bread, but it's refined flour as much as you could possibly get it refined. Your body turns it into nothing but sugar.
However, Wonder Bread, if you want to be a sponsor.
Right, you want to be a sponsor. I'll talk to you all day long. I do make a milk bread that's I didn't write the recipe down for today's notes, but I call it roly-poly bread, because I roll it like a cinnamon roll, and I brought it in here, and then you cut it.
Oh yeah.
So it's like a pull apart bread. So when you roll it like a cinnamon roll, and then you cut the loaf, when you go to eat it, you can just pull off each one of those cuts like a monkey bread.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And then it had, I think the one I made for you guys had chilies and queso fresco rolled inside of it. Yes. So it was like a Mexican type roly-poly bread. But it's a milk bread, so it's a white bread.
Mm-hmm.
It's
true, Katie. Katie says the dumb things we used to eat.
Hey man, I'm not lying. If you gave, like, my sisters hate bologna.
Oh, love it.
Fried
bologna.
Get that. Cut the little slit in it, little Pac-Man.
Yeah.
There's, I don't know. It's nostalgic to me. So if you give me a piece of Wonder Bread with a little figure 8 of yellow mustard and a slice of bologna, fold it in half, make a little half sandwich. The amount of times when there was nothing to eat, and that, like, I'd come home, sneak in the house, whatever, and it's like 1:00 in the morning. I can't, all my life. That was up until I went low sodium. So now, instead of bologna, Boar's Head has a mortadella, which is just a fancy bologna. Theirs doesn't have pistachios in it.
Good.
So it's just the little chunks of nice melt in your mouth fat. But I go for that because it's lower in sodium. It's thinly sliced. Yeah. So occasionally I will get myself some mortadella and make myself
put that little Swiss cheese on it. Done.
Or you just the squirt of mustard and you put a piece of cheese on it and roll it up and eat the tube without any bread, because there wasn't any bread in the house.
Been there, done that.
All right. That's the best.
Yes.
It's funny, the things that you grow up on, that the things that you choose to be nostalgic about. God only knows why I picked Wonder Bread with bologna to be my nostalgic thing, but my sisters both hate bologna, probably because we always had bologna sandwiches.
I love it. Yeah.
There was never,
But it all depends on what mood I was in, if it was thick sliced or not. Sometimes you're like, nope, don't want the thick sliced, and sometimes you're like, yeah, give me that thick sliced.
So my parents always got the Oscar Mayer,
of course,
bologna. Always. That was in our house. When we'd go up north to Michigan and visit my grandparents, my grandmother, I'm pretty sure it was the Eckrich thick sliced bologna. Mm-hmm. And it was like a treat to me. Like someone just flew me across the country, to Italy or something, and sliced me something that was fresh. Yeah. And it's just something that, that's the only thing they didn't have any options in the podunk little town that they live in. So it's just funny to me that I thought that was like, woohoo, I get the good bologna. That's hilarious. Oh, the memories you have.
See, I'd go to my grandparents and have Braunschweiger.
Oh, see, now that's there's a couple places around here, because we have such a prevalent farm community, that you can get the pork or beef fresh made brunch, liver sausage, pate, and because that's all it is
Yeah.
just a really fine ground, whatever. And oh my God, it is so good. So horribly bad for me because you cannot get low sodium
No,
brunch
I
water,
don't think so.
but it is so, so good. We had when I butchered the pig over at Dykstra's farm,
hmm
and she had some of that out, and I was like, this is gonna follow me for days, and I didn't care. I ate half of it. It was horrible. So my salad dressing, to get back to salad dressing on our little
Rabbit
path
hole.
rabbit hole that we just dug down. 3 tablespoons balsamic vinegar, 1 tablespoon red wine vinegar. I tend to go to a teaspoon of herbes de Provence. It's when you have herb blends, like an Italian herb blend, a Greek herb blend, they all tend to have the same kinds of blends, but there's always one thing different. The herbes de Provence tends to have like a lavender. So there's a sweetness to it that I really, really like in my salad dressings. I tend to go half olive oil, half avocado oil. So a half cup of each or 1 cup of oil. This is where you pick your good oils. The only reason I go with half and half olive oil, avocado oil is because I buy really nice, pungent, strong flavored olive oil. So I only use half a cup, A, because it's expensive, B, because it's a really strong flavor, and then I cut it with the avocado oil that's got a very, very bland taste. From that base, I can add and make whatever I want. If I want to make it creamy, you can add some mayonnaise or sour cream. If I want to make it more like a Dijon vinaigrette, you can add a few tablespoons of Dijon mustard, garlic cloves. If you want to make, like, you get the raspberry and orange vinaigrettes at restaurants and stuff like that, you just add half a cup of orange juice or cranberry juice or whatever, and that's it. And I'm talking, again, real juice. So squeeze some oranges. I know you can't squeeze cranberries, but get the real cranberry concentrate, not the fancy stuff. But I'll make that one all the time. So I start with that balsamic vinegar, red wine vinegar, herbes de Provence, and oil. And then from there, I build on it based on the dish that we're cooking. So a lot of times I just do Dijon mustard and toss it with asparagus. I've become quite the asparagus junkie now that I know that it doesn't come out of a can.
So good.
Yeah. So see, Sue, you cheat.
Yes.
Mitch used he's
Mitch
the one
made,
who
Mitch
made
some low sodium Braunschweig.
Yeah, he's the one that I always talk about that made the corned beef.
Yeah.
So I mean, he was a talented man. I don't have that kind of talent to make Braunschweig, nor the patience to make it.
Patience.
Not that it's necessarily that difficult, but it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
So the salad dressings, I'm surprised. Because I used to be a ranch girl.
Yeah.
I used to be a creamy dressing kind of girl, and I've tried to make the French dressings from scratch. I've tried to make all of them, and I found that because of how easy it is, I tend to go to that balsamic, and if I have to, I just thicken it up with some sour cream or something of that nature to make it more of a creamy type dressing. That's just my favorite. So now on to my lovely little muffin here, which isn't a muffin. It's a cake, a bread.
It's more of a bready type thing.
I don't like when they call banana bread, zucchini bread. They're not bread.
Yep.
They're not. Just because you put it in a loaf pan doesn't make it bread. It's a cake. It's a muffin. It's a whatever you want. It's not bread. You say bread, I'm thinking savory sandwich bread. Or baguettes or sourdoughs. I'm not thinking of what you call it. Not that anybody on the radio can hear my crunkly bag.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful.
People in Facebook land can see my little loaf of bread. But that base recipe, yes, baking can be quite the science, but this one I have found is pretty forgiving. If you have a stand mixer, it's even easier. I do 1 stick unsalted butter, preferably at room temperature because it will blend easier. 1 cup packed brown sugar, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and then your fruit of choice. So my banana bread is 2 bananas. This apple one that I made today is about 230 grams of applesauce, which is about how much 2 bananas is, about 230 grams. That's a tricky one because when you're making a banana bread and you switch it to something else, I made the effort to look and weigh out, because I have a scale in my kitchen. If you don't have a scale in your kitchen, they're inexpensive. Get one, so that I knew how much 2 bananas weighed. So if I want to substitute it with something else, I can substitute it with something else. Flour matters. So when you're cooking, flour matters. If you're making bread, use a bread flour. It's higher in protein. That's where the gluten and the elasticity comes from. So if you're making, and I mean, obviously, if you're making gluten-free bread, that's a different story. But if you're making something, flour matters. All-purpose flour has its place. It is not in a bread, and it is not in a pizza dough, and it is not in cupcakes. If you're making a cake or something of this nature, you get that light, fluffy banana bread, or banana cake, as I call it, with cake flour. When you get that super, you ever had banana bread and it's like a dense brick of, like, it weighs 16 pounds?
Yeah.
Because of the nature of banana bread, it's hard to get a fluffy, light cake type feeling. But the only way you're going to get close to that is with cake flour. So 1.5 cups cake flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder. I use the Rumford reduced sodium baking powder. And then from there, you can mix it up. I like ginger, so I put 2 teaspoons of ginger in mine. This one, I didn't add any ginger because I was out. So I just did 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. But you can swap up that recipe. So this one, I added craisins. But you can do nuts, delicious. You can do raisins, you can do whatever the heck you want. And it makes that kind of cupcake type dessert. So those kinds of base recipes are the, once you get something like that, and I do have a couple, I'm so horrible. I haven't posted to my website in so long, and I keep promising to. I promised someone the other day that I would post my macaroni and cheese recipe, and I didn't. I've been a little busy. What can I say? It's hard. There's a lot going on, and every time I go to post a recipe to the website, the last time I went to post, I couldn't post anything because I had to change all the plugins on my website because something got screwed up, and I had to download, and then I had to back up my website so it didn't get screwed up and I didn't lose everything before I posted something. So by the time I finished fixing everything on my website, I was tired and said, too bad you guys don't get my macaroni and cheese recipe. So I was kind of, whatever. It was what it is. Yeah. It's just me. I don't know what to do. So when you start with those base recipes, you start to realize, like with the onions and butter, or with a pan sauce, or with a hamburger helper, once you figure out that base, you can turn it into just about anything you want. Did I bring the hamburger helper in here? Because I know that you gave Coach the chili, didn't you?
No, we split the chili, but that's how you brought last time.
I don't remember if I brought the hamburger helper in before. I think I did.
We had the recipe. Well, we had the recipe.
But just like you get on the box. And that's where I steal most of my recipes or my ideas. So like one of the things that I used to do, if you go to Starbucks, you can get this little thing that's got like 2 hard-boiled eggs, some cheese, and some fruit. Oh, and that's a really good idea. At Starbucks, it's like $9 or $6 or whatever the hell it is. If you make it yourself and put it in a little tin, it's like $1.78 per serving, which is fantastic. But that's where I steal most of my stuff. So like hamburger helper, if you look at all the different kinds that they have, if you start with that base with the onions and garlic and beef or whatever you're going to make, then you just switch it up. Do I want a tomatoey one? Do I want a taco-y one? Do I, whatever, a cheesy one? You just steal the ideas from them. You just make it from scratch instead of make it. What does Sue say? I buy the freeze-dried. I'm guessing TJ's is Trader Joe's. Oh, that's a good idea. Freeze-dried raspberries from Trader Joe's and grind them up for flavoring and dressing. I'm going to have to steal that idea. I've never thought to do that. I'm going to actually make a little note before I forget, because otherwise I'll have to.
Sue, is that your deal or is that Mitch's?
It's probably if it's cranberries, it's hers. If it's
There you
curing meats, it's probably Mitch's.
Yes, we've got recipes. If you go to mylosolifestyle.com, you'll see it up there on screen, mylosolifestyle.com. There's a nice little place for recipes. You'll see that I will circle that right there. You see my mouse going around.
And I got to get more on there. Oh, that ricotta risotto, that's really good.
Yep. So here's some good ones: cast iron garlic rolls, meat sauces, ranch dips, things of that nature, all right there.
And that's where I said I wish I was better at putting some of my sauces and stuff up there. I'm slowly getting better at it. It's like I said, it's just me.
Yeah, Sue.
Yes, that's all Sue. So it's difficult. It's hard because the biggest problem with me posting to my website with my recipes is because I want the nutritional information on there. And it's not like I'm sending this stuff out to be, analyzed by the government or something, some science lab to tell me exactly what's in it.
Yeah.
I go off calculations based on, my math and the research and what, the USDA says is in certain things and so on and so forth. But I can't rely on the programs on my website to automatically calculate it for me, because one thing that's big with people in our world that are low sodium or have liver disease or heart disease or anything of that nature, they have to watch their potassium. And they only very recently started disclosing the potassium in products. So I'll post like a meat sauce and it says 0 potassium. Beef has potassium in it, has a lot of potassium in it.
Yeah.
So and I had someone come back to me and go, "Are you sure about the nutritional specs on this?" I get it. I have a disclaimer that says this is just my opinion. That being said, people trust my recipes, and if I post on there that it's low sodium or a certain amount of potassium, they're going to believe me. And it's wrong. Right. And there's a lot of cookbooks that I've looked up and they're wrong. And I counted on them and I was like, how did this make me sick? And it's because that they didn't pay attention. So it takes me a little longer to post my recipes.
Hey, Julie, how are you? Julie says, love making my own breakfast kits. Plus, I'm too freaky to eat any hard-boiled eggs from others. That's a whole different show.
So what's funny that I never really realized that. I'm okay eating the ones from Starbucks for some reason. I don't know why. But I had noticed, like, if you go to the grocery store and you can buy like 2 hard-boiled eggs and they're in this liquid, which I'm guessing is a brine of some sort. And it just weirds me out. 2 eggs sitting in some liquid solution in this little plastic packet. I don't know. There's something in my brain that goes, I shouldn't eat that. So
yeah, Kay says, I'm glad you're careful. Here's the thing. I'm going to go back to frying eggs we talked about at the beginning of the show. So I'm going to steal back there for a moment. The other thing that I've got to say is farm fresh eggs are much easier to cook with than the bleached white eggs that you get in the stores.
They are.
They flip better. They hold better. They taste better. Just all around. Now, the tough thing that I found with those, though, as we're talking about hard boiled, the bleached white ones that you get in the store, those tend to peel easier.
They do.
Than the non-bleached, farm fresh eggs.
So your farm fresh eggs will peel better if you let them get older. Oh. So the reason that the store-bought eggs, and it's funny because when the pandemic hit, and that's how I started the Fresh from the Farm McHenry County, because everyone's like, how are you getting eggs? Even Sam's Club was out of eggs and meat. And I directed everybody to the farms and subsequently created the group. But my husband and I, we made something. I don't know if we made hard-boiled eggs or egg salad or potato salad, something. And he's trying to peel the eggs. And he's about ready to like throw the whole pot in the garbage because he couldn't get them to peel. He says, I must be doing something wrong. I've been cooking these the same way for 20 years. What am I doing wrong? If you notice when you peel an egg, you know that sometimes you that membrane that doesn't come off with the egg and you peel it off the egg.
Yes.
When the egg is fresh, that is all still very compact in the layers, and that membrane doesn't separate with the shell, which is why it peels the white meat of the whites, with
yeah.
it. So if you let your eggs get a little bit older, some people say if you put like a little bit of baking soda or something in your water, which that just does that same thing. It separates those layers underneath the shell.
Interesting.
So it there's a couple different tricks, like the ice water bath.
Yeah.
That's just, it shrinks the shell enough to separate it from the thing. But you're 100% correct. And they're starting to discover, speaking of eggs, how much time we got? So speaking of eggs,
minutes, 1 minute.
The fresher, the farm fresh eggs,
Yeah.
they're better. They haven't published a whole lot on it, but their nutritional value is better because the chickens are healthier.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
And happier. So
we were blessed. My daughter's boyfriends, they live on a farm, and they had chickens that made way too many eggs. So we would get a dozen or two every week or every other week.
You can't go back.
During the pandemic, it was just delicious. Do hard-boiled eggs in the air fryer? What?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Hold on, tell me.
You can do them in the oven too. It's just a timing thing.
Oh,
yeah, I forget how long it is in the air fryer. It depends on your air fryer, but yeah, you can hard-boiled eggs in the oven. You can do them in the air fryer.
Stacy says steam the eggs; they peel so much easier.
You can do that too.
I don't know what that. I mean, with your iron?
No, the steaming basket. Oh my gosh!
I don't know.
Cooking basics 101 with Kent.
What the hell are you doing out there?
Steaming.
Are you
can get
ironing
a steaming
eggs?
Basket. Steaming basket. You probably have one in your cupboard and don't even realize it's a little steaming basket with little holes in it, and it folds up. It looks like a little spaceship.
I think I have one of those. Yes.
You put it in a pan. You put this much water in the pan, and the little legs keep the basket up in your pot, so you can put all your eggs in there, and then you put a lid on it, or your broccoli or whatever. Instead of boiling it, you steam it.
So Gwen says in the air fryer, 250 for 16 minutes. So you just lay them in there.
Yeah.
Just lay them in the air fryer.
Yep.
250 for 16 minutes.
Yep.
I'm going to try that today.
Yeah.
And I'll report back next week and let you know how it goes.
Perfect. We went over talking about hard-boiled eggs.
Yeah, that was it. Well, we finished up on hard-boiled eggs.
Find us on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube page for 216 the net. The more subscribers we have, the more luxuries we have. We are trying to reach a goal of 1,000 members. So please go to YouTube, subscribe to our 216 the net YouTube channel, and we will see you guys all next week.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for getting caught in the net with us. Remember, be good and be good to each other. For Living Low Sodium and Mary Schepp, we appreciate your time.